Greetings. I'd like to welcome everyone here as well as those online for this very historic event, the Papal Knighthood Investiture ceremony of Rabbi James Rudin, the co-founder of the St. Leo University Center for Catholic Jewish Studies. My name is Dr. Edward Dedez, and I'm the 11th president of St. Leo University. Established in 1889, St. Leo University is an innovative global Catholic liberal arts university with Benedictine-inspired values that resonate with students from all generations and religions. In addition to our beautiful university campus, we also have 13 education centers located in South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, and other parts of Florida, as well as Texas. We also have a strong online program for our students' ever-evolving needs. St. Leo University's flexible learning options and values-based education make us a leading Catholic university of international consequence for the 21st century, and we're honored to serve as hosts for today's special event. I'm very happy today to welcome to the university our guest of honor, Rabbi James Rudin, the first Jewish leader to be recognized by Pope Francis with the Papal Knighthood, an award that is given by Pope Francis to those who make outstanding contributions to society and the church. And I also want to welcome Rabbi Rudin's wife, Marcia Rudin. I'm also happy to welcome very special guests from the Archdiocese of Boston who are here on behalf of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, His Excellency Bishop Mark O'Connell, the Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Boston, and Father David Michael, Officer of Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs of the Archdiocese of Boston. I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. I'm very excited to witness this important milestone for Rabbi Rudin and for Catholic Jewish relations, and I now have the honor to introduce and turn the program over to Sister Roberta Bailey, our prioress, and Abbot Isaac Camacho, our abbot, the leaders of our Benedictine religious communities.
Thank you, Ed. Rabbi Rudin, it really is an honor to congratulate you on your knighthood. I'm not sure if you get dubbed a knight or not, but the Order of St. Gregory is really significant to us as Benedictines. If you think of Gregorian chant, that's the same Gregory. Bishop O'Connell, our sisters have a rather unique and amusing story that connects our community to the Diocese of Boston. Through one of your predecessors, at the time, the newly appointed auxiliary bishop, later Cardinal Spellman. It seems that Sister Pauline and Sister Rita had been commissioned to do a fundraising trip up through the East Coast and then back across the West Coast. When they got to Boston, Bishop Spellman greeted them in 1932, and he and Sister Rita went off into his office to talk. Sister Pauline was left in the care of the secretary, but Sister Rita never came back. They finally found out through the auxiliary bishop that she had gone to Ireland, which was her home, to do a family visit. And this young lady, Pauline, was left with the secretary. They became lifelong friends, believe me, by the time Sister Rita came back to take her home. From 1911 until 2014, this was the sisters' backyard. We trace our history from Bavaria to St. Mary's, Pennsylvania in 1852, from Pittsburgh to San Antonio in 1889. 5 sisters came in response to a plea from the local Benedictine pastor to educate the children. The sisters' first convent was a 3-story wood frame hotel in the park about a half-mile west of where we are now. Overnight, the sisters opened a girls' boarding school in their new home, and took over the administration of 2 local schools. Abbot Isaac knows better than I do the details of the parallel histories between their founding of a prep school and ours, a girls' boarding school. Through the years, proms, Valentine balls, and dramatic events offered the kids of the 2 high schools socialization opportunities. Some were hosted in the lake house, right where the infinity pool behind you is now. In 1902, the sisters joined forces with the Benedictine sisters from Kentucky to form what is now the Cullman, Alabama community. In 1911, the sisters' home that was in the park was moved on logs drawn by oxen up the hill to the location that's just this side of Benedictine Hall, about where the circular drive is that you pulled into. From the early 1930s until 1949, when the newly appointed Bishop of St. Augustine, Florida, remember Florida was all one diocese at one time, whereas today it is 7 dioceses. He recalled all the sisters back to Florida, but we had been teaching in Texas and Louisiana. They opened schools from Jacksonville to Miami, from Lakeland to Venice, Sarasota, and Ocala. They staffed Good Counsel Camp, conducted weekend parish catechetical programs, and ran summer Bible camps. We take great pride in the knowledge that the schools that bear our founding charism are all still in operation today. In 1959, the original Holy Name Convent and Academy building were deemed an unsafe residence by the fire department. Our sisters, along with the boarding school students, were graciously housed by the townspeople until the structure now known as Benedictine Hall was ready for occupancy. Beginning in the 1970s until 1998, the sisters operated housing and dining services for the St. Leo students, then held teaching administrative positions at the university. 10 years ago, our community discerned the need to downsize. The university was ready to expand westward and purchase most of our holdings. We retained 98 acres that had once been a citrus grove on the other side of the highway. Since 2014, that's where the Benedictine sisters have resided, welcomed overnight guests, daily mass attendants, retreatants, staff parish groups, planning groups, and religious on sabbatical. Out of our history, there is one thing you may be tested on. It is the significance that lines the walkway to the lake along the east side of this building. Did you notice the 100-year-old camphor trees? As a boy, Jesus learned from the Torah the important role of trees. Many of his parables included references to trees, cedars and sycamores, fig, olive, and the smallest of all beginnings, the mustard tree. The Talmud describes customs and stewardship practices that must have inspired Pope Francis in composing his papal document, Laudato Si, that calls all people to take swift and unified global action to save the earth and all God's people. Rabbi Rudin, please accept this symbol that represents our camphor trees and the tree of life. The twisting roots and the intertwined leaves in the image remind us of the history that we share. Thank you for your friendship and all your efforts that deepen the ties that bind us.
Thank you very much. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Abbot Isaac will now address the group. Thank you.
A few moments ago, while we were having lunch, the wife of the rabbi said, "Never ask a rabbi to say a few words, because they will say more than a few." It applies to abbots too. But a lot of what the sister have said is what I wanted to say too. So I just go to the end of what I have. More than 1,500 years ago, an inspired pope by the Holy Spirit, full of courage, go to the outskirts of the city of Rome and stop the invaders of the city. With his wisdom, convince Attila the Hun, king of the Goths, to turn around and stop the invasion. That was Pope Leo. St. Leo is remembered for that heroic action and for bringing the church together under his teachings and leadership. St. Leo brings the papacy as we know it today together not only as the Bishop of Rome, but the leader of the church in the known world at that time. Today, St. Leo University, following the example of Pope St. Leo, Leo the Great, takes a step under the guidance of Pope Francis, who has called us to a great event, not only of St. Leo community, but the entire church. And Rabbi, this is why we are gathered here today. Our St. Leo community are so proud to have among us their Excellencies Bishop Mark O'Connell, Bishop Emeritus Robert Lynch, and Bishop Frank Duane, and Reverend Father David Michael. Thank you for being with us. And now I am proud to welcome you into this institution that strives to follow the example of St. Leo, trying always to give our best and welcome all as Christ. Today, we all are witnesses of an event, not for us, but for the good of the church. Therefore, now it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Matthew Tapey, Professor of Theology and Director of the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, under whose leadership we have come to this moment in history. So please, welcome Matthew. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Papal Knighthood ceremony of Rabbi James Rudin. For those watching online who may not know, Rabbi Rudin founded St. Leo University's Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, or CCJS, almost 25 years ago. And I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce you to this center before we move to the ceremony portion of our program. For nearly 25 years, the mission of the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies has been to build mutual respect and understanding between Catholics, Jews, and all people of goodwill by providing opportunities for education and dialogue here in Florida and beyond. Our educational programs serve three constituencies: the student community here at St. Leo, members of the public, and the scholarly community. Over the last year in particular, we have undergone what I think is a rather remarkable expansion because of the generosity of two families who are longtime friends of the center. It's important to take a moment to recognize these families because their generosity carries forward Rabbi Rudin's legacy of building positive Catholic-Jewish relations in a very concrete way that has significantly enhanced our center's capacity to conduct research, to teach, and to organize programs and events just like this one. Because of the generosity of Gail and Paul Whiting, the CCJS was able to establish a new and critical full-time position this semester. The CCJS Administrator of Programs and Events, Ms. Sasha Bergstrasser. Sasha, would you please stand so we can officially welcome you and say hello? And would you please join me in recognizing Gail and Paul Whiting for making this new position possible? Additionally, because of the generosity of Maureen and Douglas Cohn, a new full-time visiting faculty position was established earlier this year, the Maureen and Douglas Cohn Visiting Chair in Jewish Thought. Please join me in recognizing the Cohns for their incredible generosity. Taken together, these gifts have been transformative for our center. I now want to introduce you to my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi David Mayan, the inaugural Maureen and Douglas Cohn Visiting Chair in Jewish Thought.
Hello and welcome again. It's very humbling and exciting to be here at the center and to be at a place that was made possible by the hard work and vision of many people that came before me. Obviously that's true about St. Leo's, but specifically the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies is a place that since a number of years ago, as I got more deeply involved in Christian Jewish and Catholic Jewish dialogue and relations, I was aware of it as being a very important center, really one of several nerve centers of these kind of institutions at Catholic institutions, these centers that make possible the growing edge of a kind of encounter and dialogue that was inaugurated by the Catholic Church with Nostra Aetate. Nostra Aetate in 1965 was a historic milestone for the Church, but it was also, as its authors and everyone at the time recognized, it was also the beginning of a new kind of dialogue and encounter between the Jewish people and Catholics in particular and Christians. The continuation of this work, which began with important formulations and statements, needed to take the form of dialogue and living encounters, which is where those formulations originally grew out of as well, as everyone recognized. These living encounters require the possibility of honest critique or corrections of perception of self and other. And that has to be built on a basis of patience and generosity and true friendship, which requires time and requires commitment. The challenge of this work is also its greatest promise, because in trying to correct our perceptions of the other, we need to recognize that for many Christians, as for many Jews, in different ways, our own self-perceptions of what it is to be a Jew or a Christian is in part based on an image of what the other is. And so that's part of why it can be so challenging to correct our image of the other, is because it's not only a transformation of our view of another, but it actually, to some extent, causes us to have to look anew at ourselves, or it can transform our sense of ourselves. Perception of the other is also a transformation in the perception of ourselves. I am very grateful to be here and to see Rabbi Rudin for his tireless work in contributing to this dialogue and also in helping to create and hold spaces for others in the present and in the future for this dialogue and this work to continue. It's very well deserved. Thank you.
As you can see, Rabbi Rudin has left his mark on St. Leo. In addition to his pioneering work in positive interreligious relations throughout the world, Rabbi Rudin has established a very strong tradition of interreligious dialogue on the west coast of Florida. Through his co-founding of the center, he has made it possible for future generations of scholars to do the work of building mutual respect and understanding between Catholics and Jews and all people of goodwill. I now want to move to the investiture portion of today's program by introducing Rabbi Rudin, especially for those present today or who may be watching online who may not be familiar with his significant work. Rabbi Rudin is the co-founder of St. Leo University Center for Catholic Jewish Studies. He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. He attended Wesleyan University and graduated from George Washington University with academic distinction. He received his rabbinical ordination from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and did graduate studies in history at the University of Illinois. The rabbi holds honorary doctorates from St. Leo University, St. Martin's University, and HUC-JIR. He served congregations in Kansas City and Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and was a U.S. Air Force chaplain stationed in Japan and Korea. As a member of the American Jewish Committee's professional staff for 32 years, Rabbi Rudin served as the AJC's Interreligious Affairs Director. He was a member of the Camp David Presidential Retreat Chapel Committee and co-founded the National Interreligious Task Forces on Soviet Jewry and Black Jewish Relations. Rudin met many times with Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI and was the guest of honor at the 1994 Vatican event commemorating the Holocaust. His most recent book, a memoir published earlier this year, is entitled The People in the Room: Rabbis, Nuns, Pastors, Popes, and Presidents. It tells of his travels and meetings with leaders as well as community members throughout the world. He currently is the AJC's Senior Interreligious Advisor and a member of the organization's Board of Governors. Rabbi Rudin is a distinguished visiting professor of religion and Judaica at St. Leo, and he also teaches at Florida Gulf Coast University. Rabbi Rudin, would you please join us on the podium? I also want to take the time now to introduce you to His Excellency Bishop Mark O'Connell, who will be presiding over the investiture. His Excellency Bishop Mark O'Connell is an auxiliary bishop of Boston, covering the North region of the Archdiocese of Boston and pastor of St. Teresa Parish in North Reading. Bishop O'Connell was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Boston in 1990 and a bishop in 2016. He is a canon lawyer and the former judicial vicar of the Archdiocese of Boston and a seminary professor at St. John Seminary in Brighton, Massachusetts. Your Excellency, will you please join us at the podium? Following the investiture portion of the ceremony, Father David Michael, who's the Archdiocesan delegate to our interfaith communities, will share closing remarks.
Cardinal Sean O'Malley very, very much wanted to be here, but he could not. And so he called me and said that I had the honor, the great honor, of bestowing this knighthood of St. Gregory upon Rabbi Rudin. And then he asked me if I had a ferriola. I said I didn't know what that was. He said, it's the cape. So I said, oh, I get to do this, and I get to wear a cape. I don't have to say any words myself because Cardinal Sean wrote down what he wanted to say, and I'm going to read that now. Rabbi James Rudin, Knight of Gregory, St. Gregory, St. Leo University, remarks on behalf of Cardinal Sean O'Malley. Shalom and prayerful greetings to all gathered for this celebration. For several months I have been looking forward to being with you today as Rabbi James Rudin receives the papal honor of a Knight of St. Gregory, the highest honor the Church bestows on Catholic laity and, in exceptional circumstances, persons of other faiths. Can I repeat that? the highest honor the Church bestows on Catholic laity, and in exceptional circumstances, persons of other faiths. That's what we're doing today. Last week, I was contacted by the Holy Father, Pope Francis, calling me to meetings pertaining to the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, which continued through yesterday. I'm grateful to Bishop Mark O'Connell, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese, and Reverend David Michael, Archdiocesan Delegate to our interfaith communities, for taking time from their busy schedules to be with you on my behalf. I'm also grateful to Dr. Edward Daddes, President of St. Leo University, Sister Roberta Bailey, OSB, Abbot Isaac Camacho, Matthew Tappy, Director of the University Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, and Rabbi Eric Greenberg, Director of the United Nations Relations and Strategic Partnerships, and a long-standing colleague of Rabbi Rudin in the work of interfaith partnerships. In 2007, at the Vatican Mission of the United Nations, it was my privilege to present the papal honor of St. Gregory to Rabbi Leon Klinicki of happy memory, as bestowed by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. Like Rabbi Klinicki, Rabbi Rudin is a teacher and educator in the ways of peace, rooted in truth and justice. In bestowing this honor on Rabbi Rudin, Pope Francis continues the high regard the Catholic Church holds for our esteemed colleagues of the Jewish faith and the expression of gratitude for their leadership. In particular, this honor is given to Rabbi Rudin in recognition of his decades of dedication to Jewish-Catholic dialogue and to the full consequences of the promises that they have brought and continue to bring for our future together. His work has been service to the Jewish community and to humanity through the contributions that he has made in so many areas. The honor of being inducted as Knight of St. Gregory also testifies to the service Rabbi Rudin has given to the Catholic Church in furtherance of the mutual dialogue that we know to be God's will. For more than 50 years, from the friendship and shared efforts with Cardinal John O'Connor, Archbishop of New York, to initiatives with the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, and a close working relationship with the Church during the pontificates of St. Pope John Paul II, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis, Rabbi Rudin has been a force for good and a guiding light on the path of interfaith collaboration. In recent decades, Rabbi Rudin held a major role in our coming together to ensure the Shoah is never forgotten and to stand with the strength of truth to those who would deny the darkest times of human history. Without exception or hesitation, Rabbi Rudin has been a voice and witness for our Jewish brothers and sisters whose names can never be forgotten as we hold fast to the commitment of never again. And he has been a witness in truth to those who would seek to divide us, to turn us against one another by spreading falsehoods, calumny, and violence through the sin and crime of anti-Semitism. Rabbi Rudin is unmovable in his witness to the truth and to the dangers of evil, and strengthens all of us by way of his courageous and steadfast resolve. Rabbi Rudin, it is our privilege in the name of His Holiness Pope Francis to honor you today as a Knight of St. Gregory with overflowing admiration and gratitude for the gift of your life's work, your commitment to upholding the dignity of all people, to also acknowledge the important and essential role your beloved wife, Marcia, holds in your life together. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Mazel Tov. So there's a parchment, and then there's a medal. This is the parchment. It's in Latin, and the translation is Francis Pontifex Maximus, willingly acceding to the petitions addressed to us, from which we have learned that you have done well for the good and growth of the Church and the Catholic cause, in order to bear witness, public witness to our grateful will, we do hereby appoint, make effective, and proclaim you, A. James Rudin, of the United States of North America, a Knight of the Order of St. Gregory the Great, from the class of civilians, and grant you to enjoy all the privileges that are attached to this dignity. Given at Rome at St. Peter's this 22nd day of February, 2022.
Thank you. I'll give you an embrace.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the medal.
Beautiful. Lovely.
Okay, let's hold the medal first. Here's the picture. Okay.
You can put it on this little.
I haven't pinned anyone since my prom.
There you go.
This side?
Yeah. It's terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Okay.
These are also yours.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. That's Cardinal's speech.
Well, Bishop O'Connell, thank you for making the journey from Massachusetts to represent Pope Francis in the Archdiocese and the Archbishop of Boston. Cardinal Sean Patrick O'Malley, I must tell you that as I mentioned at lunch today, we had a wonderful conversation on Friday. He called from Rome, expressed his regret not being able to come here, but he assured me that everything would be in very good hands with Bishop Mark O'Connell. And of course, the Archdiocese Interreligious and Ecumenical Director, Father David Michael, is here today. I've learned after more than 50 years in the vineyard of interreligious relations, especially in the realm of Catholic-Jewish relations, I'm keenly aware that when the Pope calls one of the priests, one of the cardinals, to come to Rome, to the Vatican, the best laid plans are laid aside when you get a call to go to Rome, to the Vatican. So we are grateful that you came and represents the Pope and the Archdiocese of Boston. I deeply appreciate your generous words as well as those of the Cardinal. I was a baseball fan and am for many years. And as you know, the Boston Red Sox train in the town where Marcia and I live, Fort Myers, Florida. So we hope you'll come back on a more sunny day to watch the Red Sox in spring training. But to be selected for a papal knighthood is a highlight of both my professional and personal life. It is not a cliche to say that I figuratively stand on the shoulders of many rabbis, priests, nuns, brothers, and countless lay men and women, some of whom are here today. All of us have worked in interreligious arena. I'm especially proud to join my American Jewish Committee dear friend and colleague, Rabbi David Rosen of Jerusalem, Israel, who also received this papal knighthood a few years ago. At our luncheon earlier today, here at St. Leo University, I thank the many wonderful people, especially our president, Edward Geddes, our host for this remarkable moment in the history of Catholic-Jewish relations. I first visited this campus in 1998, and together with the then president of St. Leo, Arthur Kirk Jr., Bishop Robert Lynch, who honors us with his presence today, and Bishop John Nevins of blessed memory, we worked to establish the University Center for Catholic-Jewish Relations. We were joined in this effort by the American Jewish Committee, my professional home since 1968. And I'm pleased that my bishop from Venice, that is Venice, Florida, the Diocese of Venice, Bishop Frank DeWayne is here with us as well today. When President Kirk and Bruce Raymer, the American Jewish Committee's president back in 1998, signed a joint statement creating this center, we had no idea that nearly a quarter century later, the CCJS, the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, would become one of America's leading interreligious centers that is today so ably directed by Dr. Matthew Tapey, and now joined by Rabbi David Mayan, the Douglas and Maureen Cohn Visiting Professor of Jewish Studies. And present with us today is Rabbi Eric J. Greenberg and his wife Sarah. Rabbi Greenberg is the director of the United Nations Relations and Strategic Partnerships of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. He has played a major role in making this day a reality, and I offer him my warmest thanks for his untiring efforts. And now the best for last. During my 32 years of active duty with the AJC, I made 42 round-trip air flights, that's 84 times over the Atlantic Ocean. During those years, I constantly visited the American Jewish Committee's 32 regional offices around the United States. Too many flights, too many cramped coach seats, too much poor food, too much time away from my young family. Fortunately, there was and there is my wife, Marcia. She is a Phi Beta Kappa of Boston University. Also earned a master's degree in philosophy and religion from Columbia University and Union Theological Seminary in Manhattan, and is a former college professor. Marcia was and remains a super mother to our two extraordinary daughters, Rabbi Eve Rudin and Jennifer Rudin. Their husbands are here today, Rabbi Elliot Kleinman and Andy Finkelstein. Jennifer is a gifted entertainment talent agent. My love to them all. My interreligious itinerary brought me not necessarily in alphabetical order to Beirut, Amman, Geneva, Warsaw, Vienna, London, Seoul, South Korea, Athens, Salonika, Prague, Hamburg, Belgrade, Budapest, Bucharest, Paris, Madrid, Krakow, Berlin, Munich, Oberammergau, Kiev in the Ukraine, Aarhus, and of course, Rome, the Vatican, and Jerusalem. The worst of my professional travel destinations was Auschwitz, a place that Marcia accurately described as the vortex of evil. Each time I visited this Nazi German death camp, I actually felt an inner trembling, vibrations within my body during my several visits. And I am haunted every day of my life, knowing that had I been born in Transylvania in Europe and not in Pennsylvania in the United States, I probably would have been one of the 1.5 million Jewish children murdered during the Shoah and the Holocaust. As the American Jewish Committee's interreligious director, I appeared on radio and television programs in many countries and was the subject of many newspaper and magazine stories, all focused on building sturdy human bridges of mutual respect, mutual knowledge and understanding between Christians and Jews. I wrote a myriad of articles and books and delivered, I think, over 1,000 speeches in churches, temples, synagogues, and classrooms in the United States. And they ranged from, yes, nursery schools and kindergartens to universities, colleges, and seminaries. And as you heard, as a rabbi, I met Pope John Paul II 11 times in the United States, at the Vatican, and in Israel. Pope Benedict XVI twice in Washington, D.C., and also in Israel. As well as, I remind myself, Presidents Harry Truman, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, as well as Vice President Al Gore. I was always in a hurry, constantly in a rush to reverse 20 centuries of negative Christian attitudes towards Jews and Judaism. There was always one more bishop to meet, one more seminary to visit, one more sermon to deliver in a basilica or a cathedral, one more Christian educator asking my advice on a proposed book or film he or she was making about Jews and Judaism. There was always one more international conference to attend to rally support for Soviet Jews. There was always one more radio or television program to discuss the inextricable links and differences between Passover and Easter. There's one more journalist who was working on a deadline who wanted my views on the anti-Jewish elements in the world-famous Oberammergau Passion Play in Germany. One more public criticism of Christian attempts to convert Jews to Christianity. There was always one more media attendance to go to, and there was always one more attendance at Good Friday services as an unannounced visitor. I always wanted to know with the clergy person how he or she described the death of Jesus vis-a-vis the Jews. And so many encounters assemblies, gatherings, conclaves, colloquia, seminars, news conferences, panel discussions, classroom lectures, and media appearances. And rapidly running from one place to another, I spent almost no time wondering how a Jewish boy from Alexandria, Virginia, became an ambassador to Christians. My personal slogan, I now confess, in front of all these clergy, I now confess, was so many Christians, so much to change, so little time. In my work, I was always guided by the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, who in 5 words said it all. Buber wrote, "All real living is meaning." Thus, even our revered theologians of the past or of the present do not ultimately shape our deepest core beliefs. It is the personally lived experience, the encounters we have in everyday life that creates the most profound religious values and views. As you heard from Professor Tapie, those personal relationships provided me with a brush with history, a kind of insider's view, a front row seat of many extraordinary events, and a unique insight how positive history is made. This happens when leaders develop trust relationships with one another. Personal relationships, all real living is meaning, I discovered, count far more than differences of ideology, theology, or politics. And this was certainly true in the dramatically improved Christian relations since World War II. I met many skeptics along the way, including members of my own family, who thought that interreligious relations is a worthwhile, pleasant distraction, a nice thing to do. But I always believed it was much more than that, because throughout history, and continuing to this day, religion has been a demonic force that has unfortunately provided justification for the slaughter of millions of innocent people throughout history. And in addition, religion plays a very important part in our politics, our culture, our science, our medicine, our economics. Deeply held religious beliefs, I have written many times, are like radioactive material. If radioactive material is carefully handled, it has great positive curative value. But if it is mishandled, it can be a source of human destruction and pain. So I always saw my task on the stage that I was privileged to occupy to hopefully try to influence the people who handled this radioactive religious material would do so in beneficial ways. It wasn't always easy. And let me say there were off-the-record heated meetings, closed, angry encounters, stormy confrontations that had to be overcome. But progress, albeit hardly enough, has been made. The decades since 1945 have been momentous for Catholics and Jews, because our two communities, two ancient communities, reached out to one another to try to overcome centuries of suspicion, prejudice, and stereotypes. I have often written and said there's been more positive interactions between Catholics and Jews since the conclusion of the Vatican Council in 1965 than there were in the first 1900 years of the Church. There have been great advances, but I have no illusions that we are anywhere near completion. So let me close by voicing a challenge. We are today witnessing and experiencing a severe, widespread outbreak of the world's oldest pathology, anti-Semitism, which is the hatred of Jews and Judaism. It is our sacred mission, Catholics, the spiritual children of Rome, the eternal city, and Jews, the spiritual children of Jerusalem, the holy city, to vigorously attack and root out this obscene malignancy wherever it appears. I want to quote just one line from Nostra Aetate, the Latin meaning in our time, that extraordinary document that the Catholic bishops of the world adopted in October 1965 by a vote of 2,221 to 88. The paragraph I want to quote is very powerful and remains so. Furthermore, in her rejection of every persecution against any man, the Church, mindful of the patrimony she shares with the Jews, and moved not by political reasons, but by the gospel's spiritual love, decries hatred, persecutions, displays of anti-Semitism directed against Jews at any time and by anyone. As you heard, I am a former United States Air Force chaplain who served for 2 years in Japan and Korea. And using a military outlook, I take the Vatican Nostra Aetate Declaration from the Second Vatican Council as our official orders. And I strongly believe that there is a higher ground, a better place, a promised land for Catholics and Jews, and that there is no way to get from here to there except as we're doing here today by joining hands and marching together. Thank you again, Bishop, for this award. It means a great deal to me, to my family, and thank all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Brother David, thank you very much.
Finest I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My honor.
I am not Dennis McManus. Father Dennis, for whom I have the deepest respect, the highest respect, was unable to be here at the last minute. So I've been asked to offer a few closing words by Dr. Tapie. I have to say, I've listened to many reflections, many speeches on Catholic-Jewish relations over the years. I had the happy occasion to be Catholic chaplain at Brandeis University for the better part of 10 years. That, where did Rabbi Rudin go? Oh, he's behind me. Rabbi, that has to be the finest speech I've ever heard on this. You know, as the rabbi knows himself, because of the book that he wrote on three cardinals and a pope. That's when I first met you, when you were at Boston College to promote your new book. And you know very well that Catholic Jewish communities in Boston shared a close relationship for many decades, even before Nostra Aetate, but of course was given the official, as we Catholics say, the hechsher for that's a little joke, Catholic-Jewish relations. But prior to that, we had warm relations, certainly in the Archdiocese of Boston, I'm sure, that you still have great respect for the achievements of Cardinal Cushing, who was a tireless advocate for Catholic-Jewish relations. In his book, A Host at Last, Abram Sacker, who was the first president of Brandeis University, tells of an early Catholic-Jewish venture involving Cardinal Cushing. I don't know if you've heard this particular one. Abe Sacker writes that in the fall of 1961, Father Paul Reinert, who was a Jesuit and the president of St. Louis University, telephoned Abram Sacker to tell him of some exciting news. Pope John the 23rd had granted permission for the microfilming of a huge amount of medieval Jewish literature, some 800 codices, in the Vatican Library. Father Reinert said that this venture would be very expensive, but if Brandeis University could share the expenses, both institutions could obtain a complete set of the newly commissioned microfilms. This seemed like an irresistible opportunity, so Sacker took up the challenge and along with some Jewish colleagues went to see his old friend Cardinal Cushing. Sacker explained the microfilm project and asked whether the Cardinal didn't agree that it would be a wonderful goodwill gesture on the Church's part to support it. Indeed, the Cardinal did agree, and he promised to help, and within a short time, a check for a sizable amount of money arrived on Sacker's desk. The way I have heard it is that the way Sacker used to tell the rest of the story was that sometime after the check arrived, an occasion arose when he and Cardinal Cushing found themselves at the same event. Unable to contain his curiosity, Sacker said, "Your Eminence, you made quite a significant contribution to our project. That's a lot of money for a Catholic bishop to give to the Jews. Would you ever mind if I asked you where you got the funds?" And Cushing responded, "I got it from my Jewish friends." Sound like Cardinal Cushing? Yeah. That's on-the-ground Catholic-Jewish relations. Our encounter with Judaism has both an internal and external dimension. Internally, it has meant the need for Christians to dismantle the long, sad tradition aptly called the teaching of contempt for Jews and Judaism. And that is happening. But positively, it also means that our encounter with Judaism as a living reality challenges us Christians to articulate our own self-understanding in those places where our past distortions of Judaism may have distorted our self-understanding. Without giving up what constitutes the essence of our Christian faith, which of course we cannot do, we Christians must still take the implications of Pope John Paul's words very seriously, that Christians and Jews are intrinsically linked at the very level of our identities. But dialogue also has an external dimension as well. Dialogue, which can be understood and practiced in different ways, is a mutual exchange to build understanding, respect, and cooperation, even if agreement is not always possible. And to nurture relations built on mutual trust, just as you said in your recent reflection, so that when differences and controversies arise, we will be able to work through them and move ahead. And we certainly have had our share of differences and controversies. I once joked with a friend of mine from ADL saying, "How is it possible for me to go to bed on Sunday night thinking that all is well in the world of Catholic-Jewish relations, only to discover on Monday morning over a cup of coffee and the newspaper that we're in the midst of another crisis?" Sometimes a little humor gives one some perspective. The late Rabbi Leon Klinicki used to say that dialogue has to be about more than tea and sympathy. We need to, and in our relations, I think we try to, talk to one another frankly about the hard issues, the issues where we disagree and diverge, and this, as you mentioned, is not an easy thing to do. Also, Rabbi David mentioned the same thing, to express concerns respectfully and forthrightly, to listen without becoming defensive or resentful is very difficult. And I know that our Jewish leaders understand the need to do so, and that need must go both ways, for Christians and for Jews. And that when issues and controversies arise, our local Christian-Jewish relations, which we've nurtured and built for many years on the local level. And I think that's what the existence of these wonderful centers can really mean, is it moves out of the realm of research, which is absolutely necessary. theological studies, scriptural studies, historical studies, all necessary. But it needs to filter into local communities, to influence local communities of faith. And there, we still have a tremendous amount of work to do with new generations of clergy coming through and their responsibility for preaching, those who teach our faiths to our young people, informing them of where we are in the Catholic-Jewish dialogue and the fruits of study and the encounter. So that's what the work, I think, of these centers is so important. So if I could conclude by just saying congratulations to you, well-deserved. You are a true pioneer, and, well, we're the better for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Before we formally close our event, I want to recognize some people who have made today's day possible. For months, they have been working to organize and make this event a success, and so we want to thank Father Bob Kickham, who is the Chief of Staff of Cardinal O'Malley, who we've been working with closely. I want to also thank, and if some of you could come forward a little bit, I would like to thank Pam Blair, the Executive Assistant to the Vice President of Academic Affairs. Sasha Bergstrasser, CCGS Administrator of Programs and Events. Kathleen Pantalone, the Executive Director of the Wellness Center. And the entire St. Leo University Communications team, especially Mary McCoy, the Senior Editor and Media Relations Manager. And Anne-Marie Thornsberry, the Associate Vice President of Communications. Many thanks to everyone present and online, and for sharing this milestone in Catholic-Jewish relations with us. Please join me once more in congratulating Rabbi Jim Rudin, Knight of St. Gregory.
Thank you, brother.
It all worked.
It all worked out. You actually did. Yeah.